To stay relevant in the marketplace, organizations have to divide the work into three categories: work that will be done by technology, work that will be done by humans, and the third category is work that will be done by humans with technology. My name is Abhijit Bhaduri, and this is exactly what I do for my clients. I help them figure out which of the pieces of work has the highest strategic value when you do it with technology, and what is the work that you could do with technology, but you don't want to do with technology. You're better off doing it with humans. So, talent and technology are the two factors that shape the world of work, and this is what the show is all about. So, let's get started. Today, I have for you a guest who is really going to be talking about something that is going to impact all of us. It is impacting all of us because it is really going to be about the author who's written about AI economics and how technology transforms jobs, markets, life, and our future. Without any further ado, it's my privilege to introduce to you Ben Shiller. Welcome to the show.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here and to talk about some of our overlapping interests.
Absolutely. I want to first, off the bat, ask you this question, which you must have been asked 100 times before. Your father, Robert Shiller, is a Nobel Prize winning economist. Was it an inspiration or was it daunting to have a Nobel Prize winner in the
Yeah.
family?
So it's actually quite interesting that you asked that. The answer is really neither. So growing up, it wasn't, there was no certainty that I was going to go and become an economist. In fact, when I entered college, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do and thought very carefully about going into medical school and becoming a doctor. And then since then, I, decided that economics was sort of my calling, sort of independent of my father, something I was pretty good at and also found interesting. And so I went into it. And since then, I've gotten this question a lot: that what is it like to have a Nobel Prize winning father? With the idea that it must be difficult to compare yourself to him. And I kind of just enjoyed doing economics for the sake of doing it, and I don't make these comparisons. I think, if you make these comparisons, there's always someone who's more successful that you can compare yourself to. If you talk about someone being president, well, they can say, "Well, I wasn't the best president." So it's
True.
I'm very happy to have my father's success, and it doesn't really impact me much one way or the other, to be honest. Um,
You wrote this book, and I was first drawn to it based on the reference in Fortune magazine, where you talked about the weirdness premium. It's pretty interesting because I think somewhere around that time I had written a post about the uniqueness premium, which I wrote on my LinkedIn page. How is uniqueness different from weirdness? Talk to me about that. You
but
said that being the weirder you are, the more likely that AI cannot take away your job. Give me an
yeah,
example of that.
yeah. So I think there's actually a lot of similarity. We might have had somewhat of a similar idea in mind, but the idea that I had was that if your job is weird, and by weird I mean it's very different than what other people do, it's sort of there's a huge advantage to that, and that's because these models really need a lot of data to be successful, to do a good job at replicating what a human can do. So, just a couple of quick examples. One is self-driving vehicles. Elon Musk is very recently on the record saying that it will take 10 billion miles of training data to make a safe self-driving vehicle. Now think about that for a second. Like, how much does a person drive before we give them a driver's license, before they're good enough to be on the road? Maybe a few hundred miles? Like, it's not much.
Yeah.
And so the point is that humans are just dramatically more efficient learners. And so for any field where there's not a lot of training data, either the company would have to go out and collect the training data, which would be very expensive, or just not, enter that field. And so if your job is weirder, it doesn't necessarily have to be the whole profession, but it could be some sort of niche within the profession that makes you weird. Then there isn't enough data out there to train the models, and it's too expensive for it to be, economically viable for firms to collect it themselves. So just to give one example, like electricians, I think are a job that are pretty safe regardless. But if you're an electrician, maybe AI starts coming for that job. But if you're a rope access electrician, like someone who uses climbing gear like harnesses to fix
Mm.
the electronics in the rafters of sports stadiums, like that's a job that's going to be safe for a very long time. AI is not coming for that. So that's sort of the idea that I had with the weirdness premium, because it really comes down to the economics. The question is not whether AI can replace your job, it's whether firms will have the economic incentives to actually train it to do so.
So, in short, if you're a zookeeper who specializes in making penguins walk on land, then that job is pretty safe.
Very
Is that
safe, yes.
very safe? I was very impressed with your book, and I absolutely recommend that anyone who's interested in this particular topic should actually take a look at this because one is I like the way that you framed the whole question that think about it when we look at whether your job is safe or not and whether your role could get eliminated. One of the big deciding factors is how much training data could exist, which means the more you are able to kind of narrow slice the entire thing and go down to being a person who designs a certain kind of, let's say, in my field, designing training programs for people who are in sales, but sales for electric transformers, then that's a very, very unique place to be in. And yes, they could design a training program in general, but something specific to that. So the more contextually relevant you are, the less likely you're likely to get, knocked out by AI. Is that a good
Yeah,
conclusion?
so I would largely agree. Um, so yes, as long as what you're contextually aware in is not like a large economic opportunity. So I think the one that you examined or the one that you suggested is a great example. I actually think back to training in college. So a lot of people will go after sort of the hottest majors. You think, well, everyone's majoring in this, there's a lot of job opportunities. But those are the type of majors that I think you face the greatest risk from AI from. If it's a large major, it's a big, economic market that the firms have a lot of incentive to try and collect the data if they don't already have it, to try and automate. And so, like what you're saying, if you're, carving out a niche within a field, or trying to choose a field, I think you want to look where other people aren't looking. Um,
You talk about college, and one of the complaints about education, and especially higher education, is while the costs have gone up dramatically, the method of teaching and all of that has not gone up. In your book, I was particularly impressed to learn about this example about how AI tutors help students in Nigeria learn 2 years worth of material in exactly 42 days. That was like a stunning piece of statistic. And why is it that all the colleges and universities are not adopting something like that?
oh, that's a
What would
great
it
question.
take?
Yeah, so I don't have a ready answer for it. I think that colleges are often fairly slow to adapt. There's a number of reasons that relate to economic incentives for it. Um, but part of the reason I think is sort of risk aversion. This teaching model, as you sort of suggested, it hasn't changed in like 2000 years. The basic method that we have is quite old. And that is why the costs have gone up so much because wages go up, but the method hasn't become any more efficient. Um, so yeah, I think that the possible gains from personalization, and that's really where the gains come from. It's not that the AI is necessarily a better teacher than these experienced teachers, But when I'm teaching, I have a classroom full of students who are sort of at different levels with different backgrounds, different classes they've taken in the past. And I'm trying to teach at one speed, sort of the best average speed for that classroom. And once you have AI sort of take over the teaching, and because it's so cheap, you can have an individualized lesson for every student. If someone gets stuck on something, you kind of give them some scaffolding, try teaching it a different way. It's really quite powerful, and I think that university education, at least for the core classes, is going to be forced to change in a little in a few years. And as part of it, they're going to have to reduce the costs. I mean, in the US, $100,000 tuition per year is astronomical. Most people can't afford it. So um, I think it really is going to make both a dramatic cost reduction and an increase in the quality of education. Because even if it's not as good as a person, the ability to personalize could more than offset it.
You talked about this almost 500,000 cost for getting educated, with a undergraduate degree, which is potentially where a lot of people in some of the other countries where education costs much less. I studied in a college in India where the fee, if I were to just sort of really think about the cost of it, was barely $3, $3 a month kind of a fee.
Oh, wow.
And it's incredible that when I look at the alumni of that college, people have been doing all kinds of work in different places. So I don't know whether the cost of education has anything to do with the outcome that education provides. So there is absolutely no reason. What is the incentive for that is going to make universities change?
Well, I think when the money dries up, uh, the universities are essentially forced to change. So at most universities in the US, professors who've been there long enough have basically something called tenure where you can't be fired. But there are exceptions to that. So one is if the university is at risk of going sort of running out of money,
Bankrupt. Yeah.
and yeah, bankrupt. And so I think a lot of professors who might otherwise want to sort of cling to their existing teaching methods and changing your teaching methods and changing these strategies takes time, and they like to focus on their research, be very research active. But I think once they start to see the writing on the wall that their job might not be around much longer if they don't innovate and adapt to this new environment, then I think you'll start to see them adjusting quite quickly. And I think they have the capabilities. We have AI researchers, we have a great infrastructure, but it's not until the economic incentives become clear that you'll see a change. So I would think, if someone's college age now, um, I, I don't think that that you have many options at this point. But in a few years, you might want to even consider looking elsewhere outside of university until universities start adapting to the competition.
You've talked a lot about how technology transforms jobs, markets, life, and our future. One of the questions, and you specialize in incentives. So, one of the questions I would love to ask you is when you think about you know, choosing college majors. Traditionally, humanities has been not the course of that attracts a lot of students or something. It's usually computer science, engineering. Even in India, the default option is that you are going to do engineering somewhere, some kind. And it's subjects like political science, humanities, literature, these philosophy. These are all sort of they barely get enough students to run a class. Is that where job security is going to be in future?
So it's a great question. I sort of would start by prefacing my answer with saying that it's very hard to predict where it's going. There was a recent paper that showed that you could essentially run a survey without any people. It was just using AI agents. And they were getting results that sort of mimicked what you would get with people. So I would have thought that that type of job, like responding to a survey, was something that a computer could not replace, a human in. But we can actually see that it actually is. So with that said, I do think so. I think that the technical skills are some of the easiest to automate. If you look at something like coding or engineering, I mean, there's a lot of data out there. So I think the reason why Claude Code, if people haven't looked at that, Claude Code has become so good because of GitHub. GitHub has all of this publicly available code out there. And so there's all this training data for these models to build upon. If you think about it, so coding is one example. I don't have exact numbers on coding, but the way that LLMs became so powerful is by the size of the data set. So these models basically trained by trying to predict some outcome. And so, historically, you might have a data set with a few thousand or even a few million outcomes that you're trying to predict. But what they did is with books, every word, like the next word, could be something that you try and predict. And so the amount of predictions that you have that you're trying to sort of match with your model is, it's equivalent of something like 150 million books times 80,000 words. It's enormous. Um, and so if you think about coding as there's a lot of code out there, these books, those are the types of examples where AI has been truly marvelous and disruptive and where people are getting really scared. And so if you're going into a field where there's that type of data out there, what prior people's work is out there, and so the model can see if it can predict what the people are doing, then that type of profession could be, um, uh, in for a big surprise. Um, but it's hard to predict. So I have another example in the book about radiologists who the
Yes,
computer scientists were saying almost about a decade ago, that you should stop training them, stop training radiologists because machines can do this better. And yet
exactly.
we've reached a point where there's demand for increased work, and radiologists are actually the second or third highest paid medical specialty. They're thriving because they're using AI. So, just because AI is entering a field doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be replaced. It could augment you in ways that could raise your wages if there's room for your specialty or that market to grow.
You did mention the radiologist question, and that was a fascinating example. Now, just for the readers who have not read the book yet, and I absolutely recommend you must read the book, which is that, we know that AI can spot cancerous tissue, etc., better than what a human can. So, why is it that the radiologist, whose job should have been eliminated technically because AI is doing that prediction much better, why has the radiologist job not only survived, thrived, and become far more profitable? What has really happened with that? What was
Yeah,
your
so
finding?
there's a few things. Some of the more basic ideas is that there's still soft skills that matter. So someone has to talk to the patient, someone has to talk to the doctor, and the radiologist is much better than an algorithm at doing that. But I think the deeper answer is that radiologists and the AI equivalents have somewhat different strengths. And it actually makes me think back just this last week and Thursday and Friday, I was at a conference at Stanford University, and I saw this paper that was looking at what humans can do well and what machines can do well. And there was this plot where they showed how much or how frequently AI gets a question wrong as a function of how hard it was for a human expert in the field to get the answer correct. And it was basically flat. So AI was about as likely to get the easy stuff wrong as it was to get the hard stuff wrong, at least to turn, the stuff that'd be hard for a human. And so that means that, AI can make mind-boggling stupid errors. And so, uh, and so basically it still helps to have both a human and a machine work together to interpret these images. Just like with chess, right? Like chess started beating humans, but humans working with AI or work, these various statistical models, that combination beats either humans or machines alone. It's the combination that works better. So I think that's a big part of the example. And crucially, rather than try and basically shun AI, as a lot of authors are doing, the radiologists adopted it. They thought, how can we use this to improve our profession? And so I think, they were very accepting, they're very strategic, and they found that there are a lot of components that AI couldn't match. And so even though AI is used extensively in radiology, radiologists still have a very crucial place.
Which brings me to a really interesting question that you have in the book mentioned that your co-author has been Claude. You have
Yes.
used Claude to write, and you are also saying that that's the smarter way to write a book today.
Yeah.
Because you can do. Where does how does one draw the line? Because now when I look at for example, on LinkedIn, you see a ton of people who are using very clearly AI written uh, pieces, which are supposedly thought leadership, and they aren't because it misses something or the other. But that apart, why do you think that that is the best way to write the book?
Yeah. So I think it's really about efficiency. So AI writing, it sounds very good. It's written well. Where AI fails is with direction. It is not coming up with these great new insights or knowing exactly what to talk about. And in fact, if you don't give it very specific, you know, guidance for what you're looking for, it'll sound vague or make stuff up that sounds sort of trite. And so it won't do a great job. So I think AI is the future of writing, but I think of it more like humans will be the director. So rather than a writer, you might be a director. And it's the content or sort of the knowledge that you have, which is your large advantage. And so if if AI can write, put the words on paper as good as I can, there's no reason for me to do that part. So I have an example of one chapter in my book. Most chapters, there's a lot of back and forth, and it kind of took a while to get the AI or some of my writing to really match what I was intending and be interesting to read. But there was one chapter where I just got up one morning, I had all these ideas in my head, and I just wrote for about 30 minutes, 35, 40 minutes, and created a very rough draft for a chapter, full of spelling errors, grammatically incorrect, but it had all the key points that I wanted to hit, had all the content. And then I fed that into Claude, and what came out was almost perfect. I changed very little after that. And so it sort of illustrates it can speed up my process, help me get the ideas that I have out into the world. And I think it's going to take off. And in fact, it already has. So, I've actually gotten attacked on some of these, online communities for writing with AI. They say that's not writing. But there's just a recent paper I also saw at this conference from two of my co-authors in the past, Joel Waldfogel and Imke Reimers, that was looking at AI in writing. And so they couldn't actually see how much AI was used, but they showed that since 2022, since when ChatGPT was released, the number of books released per month has increased. It's tripled. It's an enormous increase. And there's some authors who are now releasing more than 100 books a year, something you couldn't
Whoa.
possibly do before AI existed. And so, the takeaway is although mainstream authors and a lot of authors in these groups are attacking people and saying you can't adopt AI, a lot of authors are adopting AI in huge numbers.
I think it's a lot like what's happening in many of the schools. I mean, the students are using AI to write the term papers or whatever they are supposed their assignments, and the teachers are using AI to create rubrics and lesson plans, etc. All of that.
Yep.
Uh, how do you evaluate the performance of one student versus the other if both have used AI, or if the entire class has used AI to write the term paper you are teaching? How do you use it?
That's a great question. So mostly I've moved away from grading term papers. There are some that I am doing this semester, and it's really going to be based on the ideas and how effectively they can use AI. So having written a book with AI, I learned it's not just a simple prompt. Like if you want to have some high quality writing, or at least what I think is high quality writing, um, you really need to prompt well and iterate on it. And so I think even if everyone is using AI, you can judge their skill of using AI as well as their ideas. Um, and AI can make slides as well. But one thing I've really moved towards is actually having oral presentations. So when someone has to actually present themselves live in a classroom, you can get a much better idea for how much they understand of the problem. Do they understand what they're doing? Like if AI solves some, problem for them or, ran the regressions or something like that, yeah, it looks great on paper. But once they're up there presenting it and responding to questions, it becomes, very apparent who really knows their stuff and who doesn't. And so I think it's sort of a change in medium is sort of the best way to analyze students' skills. But I also do think it's very important that we teach people how to use AI rather than just saying AI is a replacement. We want to teach them what are the skills that you need to most effectively utilize this new technology.
I like the cover of your book. I mean, it's a very, very great design. Is this also AI generated?
It's a good question. So AI is very powerful, and there's some things it does great. On that, I worked with a human artist. So I tried some AI covers, and I was much happier with the human artist. Katerina came up with a couple designs, and I just thought this is fantastic. And so the book cover has basically no AI in it. The only AI part is the emblem of the press, which is AI generated.
Perfect. You had an interesting line in your book which says, in this AI economy, the winners buy islands and the losers buy guns. Um, I thought there was you have a lot of really great lines in that.
Oh,
So is
thanks.
that you or is that AI?
That was AI. So the direction of what I was trying to do, what I wanted to get out of that section, I specified all that. But those words, those were, I can't remember if it was ChatGPT or Claude. I was using both at the time. It had a lot of great phrasing. It also had some very bad phrasing, I should say, as well. So it was very important to edit and to redo parts. But no, that one I'm pretty sure was AI.
I love that line. So winners buy islands and losers buy guns. Why is that true?
Yeah, so there's economic research out there that suggests that when things aren't going well, people who are disadvantaged, they get upset. Like this is just part of human nature. And they're not necessarily directly connecting the two, but they have a lot of stress in their life. They're working really hard, not making that much money. And at that point, sort of the incentives change. I think we've all heard this example, but the example of Luigi Mangione shooting the CEO on the street sort of speaks to that concern. And so, when people are having a really hard time, when life isn't going well, they just become a little bit more likely to look to things like guns. And it doesn't need to be most people, but if it's a small percentage that start to do that, then it becomes a much scarier world for everyone, including the super rich, except for the ones who live on their own private islands. So I really do think that we all have incentives, including those who are super wealthy, to try and make sure that we have a world that everyone wants to live in. Um,
Shankar Vedantam's book, The Hidden Brain, actually talks about why many of these gangsters actually make very little money and they could make more money if they just flip burgers in McDonald's. And yet people choose to do that kind of crime. So it is really intriguing. And I always think that, while technology creates possibilities, it is the human being who adopts the
yeah.
possibilities. And I was recently going through an article in HBR where they talk about, you know, agent managers in being the next role, which is going to be,
Mhm.
um, coming through, where you actually don't need a CS degree and you are just going to use agents and manage them to address whether it is sales, whether it's customer relations, etc. That opens up the possibility for so many people who don't even have engineering degrees to do work which is otherwise would have been considered to be a very technically demanding job. So, is the future going to be for the techies or the non-techies? What's your bet?
It's really hard to say. So if you asked me 3 months ago, I would say that the techies have a big advantage in that if you know how to evaluate the output of these models, you can use it very well. But recently, in some areas, it's gotten so good. If anyone hasn't tried using Claude Code, if any of your listeners haven't tried it to build a website or something like that, you really should. It's amazing. And so I think it might be the non-techies. So in the book, I actually talk about someone else's research by Torrin Thompson, who uh, sort of they simplified jobs into framing it as sort of three types of tasks: routine, uh, expertise, and automated, which automated could be either automating routine or expertise tasks. And so if the expert task gets automated, which could be the coding, the really difficult coding, which used to take these, brilliant math-oriented people to do, if that becomes automated, then all that's left is the other stuff, the stuff that many people could do. And so it opens up all these possibilities, sort of at the expense of those people who had formerly been experts in the field. I think part of what is crucial there is to note that these routine tasks and the expert tasks are not sort of separate jobs. They're things that must be bundled, right? If if you're submitting a receipt or doing something else, you need to know what that is for. And so the person actually working on the expert task needs to know that as well. And so these are bundled together. And if you automate the hard part, then it opens up the possibility for many other people who didn't necessarily already have that skill to enter the field. And it could be that there's room for this field to grow. Like I think we're going to have a lot more software. So if you have a field where basically the demand is capped no matter what the price is, as it becomes easier to automate, basically it will replace jobs. But if it's a market where if it were cheaper, people would like to buy a lot more of it, then as you start to automate things, the market can grow and it can accommodate many more people in it. Um, so I sort of went a little bit off tangent there, but I think the answer is it's looking like it's going to empower people who didn't necessarily have the technical skills to do things like coding and will allow them to, if they have ideas, to create businesses.
I also would sort of cast my vote in favor of the non-techies for the simple reason that if you look at a pattern, historically, several years back, uh, if you had to get anything done with a computer, you had to go and give it to the computer department. It was a separate room, separate building, which had, you had to get in, get those punch cards done. And, that was
Yeah.
a mysterious process. Then you had the desktop PCs, and now, of course, computing power is in your mobile phone. So you're progressively seeing that pattern, decentralization, I think happens in pretty much anything and everything. So that's where I
Yeah.
would think. Are you writing any other books now?
I'm not writing another book at the moment. I'm sort of trying to refocus on academic research to some extent and kept busy a little bit by this book launch. It's certainly adding more things to my plate, which has been very fun. Um, but yeah, no, I think I will write another book at some point. The issue is with writing a book is with this book, it's based on 15 years of not only my research, but attending conferences on the impacts of technological change within the field of economics. And so I had all these ideas, all these things that I thought people would like to read about. And I just hadn't had the time to write it down. And so AI helped me with that part. Um, but looking forward to come up with another book, I need to have a lot more ideas. because AI isn't coming up with the ideas. That's still a human thing. And so to write another book, I need to take some time and figure out what I actually want to write. Otherwise, I'm just going to get a book that's sort of vague and the AI's ideas. And then if it's the AI's ideas, anyone can get that just by talking to ChatGPT. They don't need me. So I hope to one day, but not in the near future.
So
Maybe a
yes,
second edition.
yeah, edition, and the fact that you've put in so much of effort. What I liked about your book is how you've put in all the work and the research that you've done. You've actually simplified it and made it accessible to people through the writing, and that I think is the hallmark of a great writer. I truly enjoyed reading your book. Totally recommend to my viewers and readers. Great book to read. Thank you, Ben, for being here on the show. And it was absolutely amazing to talk to you, even better than reading your book.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Well, I enjoyed it too.